Thank you
Good
so
luck.
much, Alex, and to the entire Vox Days Romania team, Vox Days Bucharest. I absolutely love to visit. And let me go ahead and start the slides, I guess, so it looks a little. I find myself looking off to the side because that's where I moved the StreamYard window, but I want to look at you right here. So yeah, I miss being there. I miss the family that I feel like I have there. And I miss the community, which is an amazing community. I guess the good side with the good part of virtual is that we can join from anywhere. We can jump in and dive right in, and there's no travel involved to get there. The downside, of course, and of course, another upside is that we have a bigger group of folks we can talk to and reach and share with. The downside, of course, is that we don't get to actually see you and hug you and be there, but hopefully next year, because it's a crazy world in which we live. So this is a little bit of a departure for me. Those of you who know me know that I focus a lot on just diving into a specific technology frequently, but once at a time, once in a while, I do kind of color outside the lines. This is definitely outside the lines because this is talking more generally about some things while diving into coding and integration of various different things and putting together a full solution versus kind of a more siloed solution. But I think it's good. It makes me feel good anyway. Hopefully, it'll make you feel good as well. And so, as Alex mentioned, the title is just using your coding powers for good in a world that doesn't always feel that way. And this kind of, I don't know, it was kind of heavy on my mind, and I thought, I needed to share this. I think it's good for all of us to kind of think in this direction sometimes. Again, my name is Mark Heckler. I'm a principal cloud advocate of Java and JVM languages with Microsoft. A former Spring Team member, moved over to Microsoft doing a lot of the same things with a lot of the same code and technologies, just get a little bit bigger and deeper toolbox and toy chest, if you will. So it's kind of good. I work with a lot of the same great people, just from another virtual building, if you will. So if you think of something after the fact that you want to reach out and chat with me about, I'm very happy to do that. I've listed my work and my personal emails, but the best way to reach me really is on Twitter. I live on Twitter while I occasionally do check emails. So there's the order of precedence there. But if you want to reach out to me, exchange some ideas or pick my brain or provide feedback, questions, comments, or feedback on this particular talk or any other talk I've done for that matter, you can reach me on Twitter at mkheck. If you don't want to share your thoughts with the world, that's perfectly fine. My direct messages are open, so just DM me. It's all good. A bit about me: I am an architect and developer by trade. And of course, as you know, I'm an advocate. I'm also an author. I've co-authored a couple of books, contributed content and code to several other books. I actually solo authored a book last year, and I swore I'd never do that, and yet I did. So, sometimes things change. I am a Java champion, a Java 1 rockstar, a Groundbreaker ambassador, Kotlin developer expert, and a licensed pilot. That was something that I just finally finished up, sometime back, and it's been good. I'm an instrument rated pilot. I don't do it commercially because I love to code too much, but I do love to, when I get an opportunity to go up in the sky and see things from a little different perspective, challenge my brain in different ways. The views are amazing. If you've ever been interested in that kind of thing, I highly encourage it. If not, come fly with me. So my latest book, as I mentioned last year, I released Spring Boot Up and Running. And if you're interested in learning how to build or build better cloud native Java and Kotlin applications using Spring Boot, by all means, please check it out. If you don't have an O'Reilly subscription or a Safari Books Online subscription, which is an O'Reilly property, of course, check out the link at the top. That will take you to O'Reilly. You can get a free trial if you're interested. If not, that's perfectly fine too. But of course, as with all things, the best way to reach the book is on Twitter. You're seeing a pattern here. Spring Boot book, follow that as well. I do put out information. The code repo that was supposed to be released with the book, they've had some hiccups with that, but I do have it on my personal code repository, so you can get all the code. It's all available in Java and Kotlin except for the data feed app itself, which is just Java, but everything else is both languages, so hopefully that'll provide somewhat useful information to you as well. So the plan for today, we should always start with a plan. I love a good quote, and this quote is by Leonard Bernstein, the famous composer and former conductor of the New York Philharmonic Orchestra for a number of years and a number of years ago. He once said, "To achieve great things, two things are needed: a plan and not quite enough time. We have both of those today. You can even see in the top corner, it says the plan. So we have a plan and we have not quite enough time. So that we should be fine. I do want to say that, as Polonius said, obviously Shakespeare, brevity is the soul of wit. And I realize I am the last session of the day. I'm probably standing between you and a beer and a nice meal and a good conversation about the amazing sessions you've heard today. I don't want to push my luck, so I won't run long. In fact, I'll try to cut just a few minutes off of it, but no promises, because I love what I'm talking about and I love to share it, and I hope you'll enjoy it too. But we'll do what we can, right? So the agenda for today, I want to start off by discussing a little bit about how we got here, what was the idea for this talk? I mean, this is in the middle of 2022, and it's been a really interesting time getting to this point. So we'll talk about that a bit. How to make a positive contribution, or at least give it a shot, right? We'll try. And then once we kind of identify an idea, how do we choose some public APIs? How do we find them and select from them? Because apps got to eat. If an application doesn't have data and doesn't have good data, timely data, it's not terribly useful in most cases. So the data is really what makes the application extremely useful, hopefully very useful to its end users. And then how to build a minimum viable product and get something started, right? So we'll start from there. So how did we get here? Well, you may not have noticed, but you may have, that there have been a few smallish things happening of late. Some not so smallish, some really just terribly devastating, right? The frustrating things, as I mentioned, disempowering things. I'm human. So, the last couple of years you would feel like have been an excellent training ground, in that, when we get bad news, we tune in and check out and find out that there's actually worse news on the horizon. And everybody has a little different way of dealing with it. Some people get very depressed. Some people try to respond with humor. You may find that you may notice that I kind of chuckle a bit and laugh at certain things. And it's not because sometimes I think they're funny. It's just that laughing sometimes keeps you from crying, right? Or getting angry about things. And sometimes it doesn't work, but you try. You try to do something to offset the pain that you feel in your heart sometimes. And I'm, again, like everybody else, when I get some bad news, when I know that things are happening and things are changing, the situations are volatile, I go and hit refresh on that 24-hour news cycle. And I want to find out the latest and what's happened now. And I think as a human, we're looking for that glimmer, that little bit, that spark of good news. And so often what we do when we keep refreshing on that news feed is that we just get more bad news, and that creates this kind of downward spiral, or can anyway, if we're not careful about it. But it creates this frustration factor that things are bad and they're only getting worse. But surely there's something we can do to turn that around, some positive that we can find in things, or even create in things if we can't find it from somewhere else. And that's kind of the germination of this talk, is how can we break out of that downward spiral? So I do want to say that we may have very different definitions of positive. What inspires me may not inspire you. And that's perfectly fine. What I would suggest, what I would highly recommend, is you find something, anything, small, large, anything in between, something that inspires you, something that makes you get up and not dread getting up in the morning. Maybe it's just a good cup of coffee. I'm all for that. But hopefully it involves some form of doing, right? And whether that's, contributing to something, to a cause that you care about, to people you care about or who are hurting, or whether that's writing some code that maybe gets you thinking in a direction that may result in something positive someday, even if it's not short term, maybe it's long term. That's fine. Anything that inspires you in small or large ways. As I mentioned here at the bottom, I firmly believe that action is key, because ideas only gain power through execution. If you have even the best idea in the world and never do anything about it, it doesn't do anyone any good. I mean, it may make you a little happier, but even that can turn into frustration down the road if you see nothing changing. And you have the power to change it, because we are developers, right? I firmly believe that we get into this field because we like to find things and fix them. We like to create things, and development is a very creative discipline. It's a discipline, but it's creative because we take nothing and create something out of that, and share that with others. And that's in and of itself at its heart a definition of creativity, right? So what did I do? Well, here was my idea. I came up with the OSO system, pronounced oso, like bear in Spanish, right? And that was just a crazy idea that I had, a small idea that may someday be a big idea. It may grow up into a big idea, but certainly right now it's a very small idea, but it makes me happy, right? So again, I'm a pilot. I sought out, and of course they're very prevalent. They're bountiful. The number of feeds you can find for aircraft information and flight information. I call this my open source early warning system because, well, I'll just be very frank about this. I get into Wordle. I like Wordle. I don't know who does, who doesn't. I know some people just absolutely love it. Some don't. That's fine. But Wordle is a once a day game, I guess you'd say, that you try to find the 5-letter word that is chosen by the now New York Times. It was a private thing where you choose a word and you try to figure out that word, and you get so many guesses to do that. So I have a healthy competition with a friend in South Africa and a friend in Canada. And this friend in Canada, you know, when he outdoes me, I don't know, it just kind of grinds my gears. And when I outdo him, I always kind of worry it's going to do something to him. He's going to just snap and he's going to fly down here and he's going to give me a piece of his mind, right? So I wanted to be able to create an open source early warning system so I can monitor some public data feeds of flights. I can define the geographical boundaries. And in this case, I just want to know my particular area. So if there's an aircraft flying into my area, I want to know about it. And then maybe filter by flight origin, because he's in British Columbia, Canada. And if I want to filter based on just see the Canadian flights coming into my area, that's good. I also want to specify track. So if I see British Columbia is kind of northwest, so if I want to track just the flights that are inbound on a track that is proceeding to the southeast from the northwest, then I want to be able to do that. So Canadian flights that are tracking in from the northwest. Now, for anybody who's curious about this kind of thing, there are all kinds of feeds out there. There are all kinds of ways to identify aircraft. Typically, you have a combination of transponder information that's provided, and you have radar information that's provided from various different radar facilities around the globe. And the transponder information that actually can show up whether, of course, there's military and civilian, but obviously if they're in civilian airspace, they interact to some degree with the civilian systems. But even if they don't, they have what they call an identification friend or foe, an IFF system. And there are ways and different feeds and obviously sources that you can find that can give you an idea. So even if you're just kind of curious about military flights, like I saw a couple of Black Hawk helicopters just almost accidentally the other day, that's kind of cool, right? So that gives you sometimes an idea of what you can see. Sometimes you can't, but it's fun, right? And it's maybe somewhat useful at some point. So because again, I have to look out for my buddy. If he comes down, I want to be ready for him when he gets here. So again, this is an early first cut proof of concept, and it makes me just feel good. It's something to take my mind off the current catastrophes and frustrations and crises and just terrible things going on in the world. And it allows me in some way to maybe contribute, if not today, at some point down the road, in some positive way to the conversation, right? So once I decided, yeah, I have this idea, I want to do something about it. So let's say you have an idea and you think this would be really cool. This would be really maybe useful, maybe not to anyone else but me, but sure, maybe someday it'll grow up and be a big app and a lot of people use it. That's fine. How do you then identify and choose a public API or public APIs if you're incorporating multiple APIs? Well, here are the things that I kind of look at, and I don't think this is crazy unusual, right? But generally, I follow somewhat along this order. It may vary depending on what your data is or your data needs are. But I kind of follow these checklists. I look at data quality. Is the data relevant? Is it useful? And is it clean or at least easily sanitized? Um, and then you start looking at data freshness, the refresh rate. Maybe it's real time or near real time. Maybe it's a periodic update, quarterly, annually, whatever. A live feed is often ideal for these kind of things. You know, if you really want up to the second information, you want real time or just live, you know, where it's constantly pushing data out. But the downside is many times a live data feed, you know, the costs are higher because an update frequency typically corresponds, or often anyway, frequently or often corresponds to cost as well. So the more frequently it's updated, the more live it is, the more real time it is. A lot of times the costs are higher for that as well. Not always, but it's something to keep in mind. You also need to look at support costs in case you have issues with the API or issues, you know, getting the data and consuming the data. And then of course there's API usability, because sometimes you have a good data set which just has a terrible API. It was looks like it was designed by people who just really didn't want you to use it. And that actually brings me to one time I had done a co-presentation on a really cool set of technologies with graph data. And my co-presenter and I found this Marvel Comics data set, which was super, super cool. The problem, of course, is that it felt a lot like Marvel had actually, in an effort to say, look, we're developer friendly, just done a data dump, a one-time data dump, didn't ever refresh it. The data quality was somewhat less than spectacular. It wasn't very clean. There were all kinds of issues. It was terribly difficult to sanitize. My co-presenter did just an amazing job with keeping that or getting that into a consumable state. And it was cool data, but it wasn't up to the minute. It wasn't even up to the month or up to the year. So if that satisfies your data needs, maybe that's perfect, and that worked for us. If you're looking at something like flight tracking, obviously you want real time or very near real time, and that high degree of fidelity, easy to consume an API, low cost, because you're going to be constantly pulling it or receiving the data from it. So you don't want something that's going to break the bank. And then, of course, in many cases, you'll want to use multiple public APIs. So you want something that will easily integratable the data with other data sources. So once we have our data and our public APIs selected, how do we build that minimum viable product? Well, I like to go back to the old joke: how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, right? Because eating an elephant all at once would be impossible, but maybe one bite at a time we can get through that. And please, 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 that's just an expression. Please don't eat any elephants. I shouldn't probably have to say that, but I'm going to say it anyway just to be safe. So how do we get there? I'm going to stop and take a quick drink of coffee because I feel, you know, I'm so sluggish. You can tell probably. So what I like to do, what I recommend is taking that rough idea. You just have a crazy idea, and maybe it's not fully fleshed out. Probably isn't at this point, but just expand that idea just enough to start. You don't have to have it fully baked. You just have to have enough of a thread to pull on, and you start with that. Just start, right? So easy. It's just one word: just start. But seriously, the key is to get started and to take small steps. You don't have to finish it in an hour or a day. You may not even ever finish it. I mean, no software really is truly finished, right? Because there's always something more you can do. So the key is not to look at wow, I want to be able to do these 50 things and do, 500 aspects of each thing, and it's going to be amazing, and everyone in the world will use this. And no, maybe no one will use it. Maybe you'll never get it done. Maybe just start with one thing, one small thing, and build out from there. Make steady progress, even if it's slow, even if it's halting. If you're still moving forward, even if it's by centimeters, that's fine. Just it's still forward movement, right? So keep making that steady progress every time you get a chance, and you find that it's actually very healthy for you mentally, as well as getting something out there maybe that others can use, or at least you can talk about or feel good about at the very least. So keep moving forward. Start small. That's the word minimum, and build out to a viable product. So let's do what we do. Let's code, and let's just dive into this. And I'll kind of talk you through it as I go. So let's see. Let's stop that. Let's go to Chrome, and I'm going to spawn a new window and move that over here. There we go. Maximize. Oh, good. Yeah, for some reason, when I have things like StreamYard streaming platforms open, it does not let me expand the windows automatically. I have keystrokes that do that, and of course, it just disables them somehow. Conflicting keystrokes, but we'll get there from here, right? It's not a showstopper. So this is where I like to start most of my efforts with the Spring initializer, because what and I should actually say that I actually have already created that consolidating and aggregating data feed. I currently only have one data feed. I'm using the OpenSky Network API, OpenSky-network.org, I should say, and that gets me some really good data, and it's completely free to consume. That's a great way to start, right? Because you don't want to break the bank when you're just starting to play around, and you don't want to exhaust an API call limit. That's a great way to start. I'm going to be adding in other things as I go, but that's my current feed at this point. I've built out an API and ways to filter and such not, and I'm going to be creating a couple of different applications to use that and show that from a more of a front end perspective. And that's a little bit of a misnomer because it's a back end as a front end as well. But I've got a couple different things as well as some map integration and whatnot. So let's get started. We'll start small and again, build out from there. So I'm going to just create a couple of applications here. We'll start with one, right? So we'll start again, pretty small. I'm going to call this, I should say I'm going to choose to use Maven as my build system and Java as the language. But again, you can make different choices. They're fine. Current version of Spring Boot. I'm going to just change some of the parameters here for the metadata. I'm going to call this my flight list because I'm going to do some lists and just, again, very simple lists. So lists, let's see, flight lists. That works. I'm going to use Java 17 because why would we not, right? It's the current version. If you have limitations that keep you on older stuff, that's fine. You know, again, you see that the Spring team actually supports back to Java 8 with Spring Boot 2.x, and that's perfectly fine. I just like to go up and use some of the newer stuff as well, and I'm sure you do as well when you can. So I'm going to use Spring Web and Timeleaf. And Timeleaf is Spring Reactive Web. It doesn't necessarily have to be done this way with reactive. I fall into this pattern quite a lot. If you'd rather use Spring MVC, yeah, that's a good and valid option as well. But Timeleaf supports either one. Does the conversions for you automatically, and it gives you a templating engine. So I'm going to do that for my application here now. So let's do this. I'm going to open this up. And let's see. So, yeah, that's fine. That's in downloads, but that works. Yeah, that's fine. So we'll go to our source and main. Oh, POM. Let's do that. And for some reason, that's opening it up on the other screen and challenging me for permissions, of course. Okay, so that works. Let's drag this over here and we'll place that right here. So this is our flight list project. I'm opening this up on my favorite IDE, NetBeans. Kidding. No, if you're a NetBeans user, it's all good. Eclipse, that's fine. VS Code, I love VS Code. As you might imagine, it's a Microsoft sponsored and driven project. I use it extensively, but for a lot of my development work, I still and will continue to use IntelliJ. It's just a great IDE. So let's go to our application properties. I'm not going to change anything because the default port for applications is 8080. I'm just going to run this on 8080. So that's perfectly fine. And I'm going to just go to the application. We're going to start coding. Now, I am going to just take a couple of little coding shortcuts because, again, time is somewhat tight today, but I want to make sure I get through all of the good stuff, if you will. So I'm going to copy paste my domain class here, and I'm using a record. So that's the Java 17 I wanted versus Java 11. And I want to create various different position objects. So we're going to have positions that are reported on for our different aircraft coming into our area, my area, around the St. Louis metropolitan area in the center of the United States. So we have our domain class, and that's cool. I'm now going to just create some code here. So I'm going to write some code. I want a controller class. Come on, import class. Now, some of you may be thinking, well, why not a REST controller, right? So REST controller, REST controller actually incorporates the controller annotation, but it also returns as the response the actual object or objects that you create. What we want to do is use our templating engine to return a view. So this is, in the model view controller type of architecture, we have a controller here. We'll call this our class. This will be our list controller, and we're going to, well, the first thing I want to do is create our web client, our reactive web client, because I'm going to use that to reach out to our backend service, which is providing our data feed for our different aircraft that are flying into our area. So I'm going to create this. I'm going to point this to http://localhost 9090, and that's exactly where that's going to run. I'm going to close that out so we have that. And the reason I'm doing this on this one side is because I'm going to be doing something shortly on the other. Let's see if I can maximize this. No, it's just not going to let me. So we'll again do this the hard way. It's fine. I miss my my key shortcuts here. So using this web client, we're going to reach out to our backend, grab that data feed, and use that, consume that in some way. So I'm going to define a couple of endpoints here. I'm going to call this one countries because I want to see what countries, what the origin countries are for the different aircraft. So I can spot my buddy coming in from Canada, right? And I'm going to return a string here. We'll call this get positions. And again, since we're using a templating engine, we're going to just return a string which will map to or correspond to a timeleaf template, which is an HTML file with timeleaf code in it, right? So I'm going to call this display countries, and that will get us a couple of things. I'll go ahead and do the same thing here for positions because we want to be able to return positions and get. Oh, I actually called this positions, didn't I? Let's see, countries, and we'll call this get positions. Getting ahead of myself. Return display positions. All right, so we'll start there. Now I do need to open this back up because what I want to do is go over to our code here, and we can see that we have no we're missing a couple of things, right? So what I want to do now is just create a new directory here. We'll call this static, not status. And then we'll create another directory and we'll call this templates because we're going to create a couple of templates. We're going to create a static file. And the static file actually, and that doesn't just mean that there's a bunch of static going on, right? What I want to do is here in my static, I want to just create an HTML file, and we'll just call this index, right? And here's our index.html. It's very simple, but I want to actually, again, I'm going to cheat a little and copy paste because, I mean, you probably didn't come here to watch me write HTML or JavaScript down the road here, but this gets us started. This is just a simple index file. And indeed, if I ran this now, let's just run this just to prove there's nothing up my sleeve. Local host, typing helps, local host 8080. There we go. So we see that it works. And I've done nothing besides just put this in my static folder. I have an index.html. Boot is smart enough to load this by default when you just go to the base directory. So that's cool. Now we need to have a couple of template files here, display countries and display positions. So I'm just going to go over to my templates. I'm going to do a new HTML file, and we'll call this one display countries. And we'll also go back here and we'll do HTML for display positions. All right, we'll come back to those. So let's go back to our application and let's get busy, right? So we have our web client that we can use to pull in our data, and we have at least the basics of wiring here where we can pull these up. So let's go ahead and do some things here that might turn out to be somewhat semi-useful as we go. So I'm going to start with the countries. So here with the countries, I'm going to keep things very simple. I should add that, again, with the model view controller approach, we actually have access to the model here. So I'm going to import that. There we go. So I'm going to use the model to add an attribute, because what I want to do is populate the countries, right? Countries. Ooh, typing is just terrible today. And I'm going to use our web client to get a list of those countries. I'm going to pass the URI, and I'm going to add to that URI here, because we're going to localhost 9090. I want to grab a list of the countries, which I'm serving up from my data feed. I'm going to retrieve those and convert the body to a flux. If you're not familiar with reactive programming, this is a little bit of a misstatement, but bear with me. It's kind of like a reactive iterable, right? It just passes information as it comes in terms of numerous data points, right? So I'm just actually going to be passing a flux of strings. And because again, they're just the names of the countries in this point. Now, this will call the Timeleaf templating engine will load display countries, which as of yet we haven't really done much with, right? That looks pretty plain. So I'm going to just grab that, and I'm going to make this into something semi-useful. So I'm pasting this in, and again, all I'm using is Timeleaf. I've got an automatic refresh set up here, and that actually, yeah, I do. So I've got a refresh going in. And it's just going to list the countries that are represented from the aircraft that are in the area. So let's check that out. Let's go ahead and start that and make sure that's all working. How are we doing on time? Doing great. Plenty of time. Started up in 1.2 seconds, and I'm not even trying. So that's good. Let's go here. Oops. We'll refresh that. Let's go to the countries list. And we see just for my area, I have flights. There he is. I'll bet he's on one of these Canadian flights. So we better get busy so we can see what these flights are. So we have Canadian flights and we have US flights that are in our area at this point in time, in my area. So let's go ahead and build out the other endpoint, which is the position. So let's get started here. Once again, we pass in our model. Now I'm going to add some capabilities to this, because I mean, this would work, right? But what I want to do is make this a little bit fancier, a little more powerful. So what I'm going to do is just add some optional parameters here. So I'm going to add string originating country and string track low and string track high. So I can see which direction someone may be coming in from, right? So I'm also going to make this at request param, and I'm going to make this not required, right? Because maybe we don't specify an originating country so we can get everything. Maybe we don't specify a range of track information so we can just get them all. But maybe we do. Maybe we want to filter based on these things. So let's start with that. So I'm going to, at this point, just build our query. So we may have our OC param, right? And let's see if null equals OC, right? So if we don't have anything coming in for OC, we're just going to make this quotes. If not, we want to have OC equals and add the OC to it, right? So that should work pretty well. Let's go ahead and do our track params, right? Params equals. So if null equals track low, or because if we get null in either one, if we don't have either one specified or one of the other specified, if we don't have them both specified, I should say, we don't want to continue. So we with that, so we just bring in everything still. So null equals, typing is just terrible today, equals track high. So if those are both nulls, right, then what we want to do is just have nothing there. But if they're not null, what we want to do is specify the parameters track low equals plus track low plus my fingers are just not finding the keys today. Amper track high equals plus track high. Right. Okay, so that that should work, right? And then we want to do our all params, and we'll just bring it all together. So equals our OC param plus, can't even type again, plus, there we go. So if our track params length is greater than 0, then we have track params, right? So we want to add in our ampersand plus our track params. Right? Otherwise, nothing. So that looks reasonable enough. So now let's build out our model, right? So we do a model.add attribute. We're going to point this to positions. So we're going to add any positions to a positions variable. And then let's do a retrieve. So client.get, retrieve the values, and we'll add to our URI of positions, and then plus, and at this point, we need to check to see if all params.length is greater than 0. If it is, that's great. We actually have parameters. So we want to add our question mark and then plus all params. And if not, just nothing. So that's good. So now we've got our body to flux. We want to, actually that's our URI. Let's make this work right. URI, and then we'll retrieve the values. URI. Retrieve, nope. Oh, well, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's go back here above retrieve. There we go. And pull that, and we'll convert the body to a flux. And this is of positions, right? And there we go. So we've added this list of positions to our model, and we're passing that to display positions. Now we're almost done, but we still have nothing really in our display positions. So I'm going to go and grab that code. Well, HTML and JavaScript, if you prefer. Is that code? I don't know. Does that count? I don't know. I'm going to go and clean this up because these are values that we're not using. And let's just go grab that, and let's restart and see what we have now. See if my buddy is on his way down here, or maybe that was just a false alarm. Do a quick restart. Oh, look at that, less than a second. That's, again, not even trying. That's so good. All right, so let's refresh this. Our countries, oh, good. Canada is still represented here, so we'll go to positions. Oh, let's see. What did I do wrong here? Let's see what I've got, what I missed. Oh, typo. Well, yeah, that does make a difference. Computer is so literal. So positions. There we go. Let's try that. Maybe that'll work just a bit better. Yeah, fingers are cold. I'm not sure why, but that's why the typing isn't going so well. So that looks a little better, right? But it's. I mean, there are quite a few flights just in this little area. So let's see if we can maybe skinny this down here. So we'll do OC equals Canada. Oh, that looks much better. And we see that it's actually, if I zoom in on this just a bit, we see that the track is 224. Actually, that's coming in from the northeast. So I'm probably safe. It's probably not my friend who's coming in, but that's good to know, right? So I'm going to go ahead and try some different things. I'm going to just do a track low equals, let's say 90. So it's heading east, and track high equals 180. So we'll just have tracks that are heading east to southeast. Well, that's a good number of them too. So that's pretty good. Now, and all of those are US. So let's see, it was 220 something, right? So 230, let's just do that. And we've got Canada in there. So let's see if I can go ahead and add in and OC equals Canada. Oh yeah, look at that. So it still captures it. Now, if I did go ahead and tighten this up to where it was instead of 230, because we see it's coming in on track 224, let's just say 220, and we get nothing, right? And that's working exactly as we expected it to. It's nothing fancy, but it's kind of nice to be able to pull this stuff up and see it. And by the way, I've got a 5-second refresh in here, so let me just scale this back out so we can see them all. So every 5 seconds, it does a refresh. We get updated positions. So if we just highlight this, we can see when it refreshes. If we pull up, let's see, we'll do a The speed's pretty consistent, but you can see it as it's refreshing. So that's okay, right? That's a good start. And that is kind of cool. But let's go ahead and see what else we can do. So I'm going to go back to the Spring Initializer and let's create another application, because this is where I think it's starting to get kind of fun. Now that you'll see once I'm done where this is all going to tie in together, I think. But it's a good start, as they say. It's a valid start. I'm going to create a flight map. The idea came to me that, we have these Bing maps that are really, super good, super useful, and kind of pretty. And maybe I could superimpose these flight positions on a map and see as they move. So again, it's early days, but why not? Why not see if we can get something started there? So this is a flight map. I'm going to use the same versions of Boot and Java, Maven, of course. And then create a jar and Java 17. That's all good. I'm just going to bring in the reactive web dependency, and that's good enough for what I need, because I'm going to be doing more in JavaScript. Please forgive me. It is what it is, right? Okay, so let's go here. Let me see if I can open that up. I will unzip that and load that. And once again, it took this to the other window. So this is the downside, I guess, of having multiple windows. Thank goodness we have them, though, or multiple monitors. So I'm going to scooch this in just a bit, and then I will bring that over. And then let's bring this guy over. Come on, window. Yeah, so that's good. And then I'll just bring this over to Meetup. So we got them together. All right. Orderly. All right. So now I'm going to first go to the application.properties, because I want to create this and have this run on another port, so I don't have port conflicts. Port conflicts generally are a bad thing. And let's go to our application code, and let's get started with this. The domain is a lot simpler here, right? So I don't need to have all of this information to plot points on a map. Again, I'm going to be bringing in all this information at some point, so I can do some more cool things with it. But for now, let's create this as a record and keep it pretty tight. So I'm going to just have a couple of parameters here, and we'll just go from there. That they are enough as it is. So I'm going to be keeping track of the latitude, right? I guess that kind of makes sense. And the longitude. Now, I am actually, since I'm going to be dealing with an API that provides a lot more information, what I want to do is ignore the properties that I don't care about. So I'm going to ignore anything that's unknown here, and I'm going to just define the JSON property, because this is coming in as a property called latitude. And of course, I could do this multiple ways. I wouldn't even have to have a difference here, but I like to do it like I want to do it, right? So that's cool. Longitude, and we'll make that go away. And that's good. Now, this is pretty simple, actually, in terms of the front end. I am going to create a REST controller here, because this will only be used to be called from the JavaScript, the HTML and JavaScript front-end application, to provide these positions, this list of positions, right? So I'm going to create this class called class, and this is our map controller. And I'm going to create a get mapping here for positions, right? And we'll respond with return a flux of positions again. This is that publisher, reactive streams publisher, which will return a number of positions when queried. So we'll do a get positions. We'll define this and we'll return. Oh, but we need to access this, right? Once again, we need to define a web client. Client equals, all right, so web client.create, and we will point once again to http://localhost 9090. There we go. Okay, so we're going to return client.get and URI, of course, because we want the /positions, make sure I don't typo that time. We'll retrieve that, convert the body to a flux of type position, and that should be sufficient. But we need to access this from something, and that's where, again, this comes in. So we're going to create, here are our resources. Let's go ahead and create a new directory. We'll call this, once again, static. with one eye. There we go. Sometimes hard to read. I've got everything, set up the way I like it, but have to zoom in sometimes manually. And then I'm going to create an HTML file. We'll call this index.html because that way it'll load automatically. And then what I want to do is just grab that index.html file that I've already got defined, put a lot of work into that to access Google, or excuse me, not Google, definitely not Google Maps, and pull up Bing Maps here and run with that. So let's run that. And this is where it starts to get even more fun, right? I mean, we've been having fun so far. I hope. I have been. Hopefully you have too. So let's pull this up and take a look. So we've got our position reports. Those are still being fed. That's good. So let's go to localhost 8181. Let's see what we get. Oh, look at that. That's so nice. So now if we refresh, and I don't have an automatic refresh set up on this, I could, but there are a lot of things that I have on my list that I want to do. I want to be able to assign a particular icon that may correspond with the aircraft type. Right now, I just have dots, so I can see where they are. I want to set it up on variable refresh rates and things like that, and just maybe point the icons in a particular way to follow the track, so you can kind of get a better idea of incoming. So you're not necessarily just looking at them where they are, but kind of the direction they're heading without having to hit refresh to see that direction clearly. So yeah, this is kind of cool, right? We've got some integration things going here to pull in the data from, at this point, one, but eventually multiple different public APIs, data feeds, and then to provide that mapping wise, visually, as well as to see what all is coming in and be able to filter accordingly. So let's see. So yeah, I do I have enough time? I have enough time to show one other thing here, because I'm going to have to stop this data feed behind the scenes.
10 more minutes.
10 more minutes. Okay, so we've got time. So I actually have the, and to define these, the boundaries, what I do is kind of a square boundary. So the minimum lat long and the maximum lat long. But for instance, if you wanted to define just a general region here and change this, so for instance, here, let me do a restart on this, and we'll go ahead and grab our data feed once again. Yes, you can see it's saying, hey, I lost my connection to the backend data feed. I need to make that a little less jarring when it does that. Everything picks back up, of course, but it looks a little ugly when it happens. We'll wait for this to refresh. All right, there we go. So this might look a little different, right? So I'm going to go ahead and refresh. Oh, I haven't actually done anything with the map to change where it starts, the starting point. But as we can see, when we just zoom in here, we can get a little better look at the airspace that's over the general boundary. And of course, Romania has some protrusions in the country. No country is perfectly square, right? Wouldn't that be handy? But I kind of went out to where I could catch this end, the western tip of Romania, and then over. So you can see what's in the general vicinity. If you get the position report, you can even see what all is there. So if we go here, I'm going to go ahead and open this up with countries, spelling counts. We get extra points for proper spelling, apparently. And we can see that we have aircraft that are representing various different, or countries of origin, I should say, of various different aircraft that are flying in your airspace at this point in time. So I find that personally very cool, very informative, very interesting. It doesn't do much to let you know if either of my Wordle buddies are headed your way, but it certainly is kind of fascinating to see as it comes. So with that, I'm actually I promised to try to wrap up on time. I think we're going to make that. So let me go ahead and get to the last slide, because at this point people say, well, this looks pretty interesting. Where do I find the code? Well, the code is out there, and the code will be constantly evolving, because again, these are early days on this code. This was something that I had an idea of not that long ago. And I spoke with Alex and Andra, and they said, this sounds kind of interesting. Let's run with this. So I've been working on this, and I will continue to work on this. The updates will be coming. Again, sometimes at a slow pace, sometimes at a fast pace, but they will be coming. Pull requests are welcome too. And just ideas. If you have ideas, hey, what about this? Talk to me. The best way to reach me, the best way to talk to me again is on Twitter. Follow me on Twitter, shoot me a direct message, publicly tweet me. It's all good. Happy to carry on the conversation, whatever way you choose. Email also, but I may be a little slower than Twitter to respond. So if you want to check out the code, please do. Go to my GitHub repository under MKHeck, do good, do dash good, and star that, watch that, and keep your eyes out, because it's frankly, it's fun already, but it's just getting more fun as I go along with it. So thanks for coming. Thanks for having me be a part of Vox Days Bucharest, Vox Days Romania. I just cannot wait to see you all again in person and give you a big hug and share coffee and share stories and just code together.